I was very what's the word? Judgmental about it. I was thinking this just is no. It's and I'm a very open person and will talk about most things. But the more I got into it, it was A, fascinating, B, hugely important because I had no idea the implications, both politically, financially, the period of poverty in this country. And it's a very important piece of work. But I did start out as that kind of, biased, sort of, stuck up, not stuck up in a snobbish way, but sort of buttoned up person thinking this is just too much. So it's a really amazing piece of work, I've got to say.
Well, that's very. I mean, I think somebody said to me, which I think maybe will be where you were coming from. I didn't know I needed to read a whole book about this until I realized I did, in the sense of, and I didn't know all the stories before. I didn't know if there was a book in it, but I knew I wanted to do something because of talking about it and getting such a reaction, and that's something so regular, that happens to most women most months, for not most of their lives now because we're living longer, but for a significant part of their lives, is still so disgusting to them a lot of the time, never mind anyone else. And I think,
Mm.
there's a stat in there about a huge number of women. It was a study for NHS England, who are living also with discomfort in that area of their body, whether it's to do with bladder, whether it's to do with having sex, whether it's to do with pain. And I myself didn't get diagnosed till I was 31 with my condition. And I always had this sinking feeling. I knew when perhaps we would start trying for a child that something wasn't right with me, and I had failed to get answers. So I think there's lots of funny things as well. You
Mm.
mentioned the lady who nearly went to jail for her period. I mean, that is one of those stories because
It's
she's having
tragic
period
too.
sex.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a tragedy to it, that she would rather like get locked up for stealing a
Mm.
bloodstained set of bed sheets than admit to the copper what she was doing. But it has been very shrouded, and there are lots of people who will say, well, I don't need to talk about it. That's fine, but it's reserving the right to do so if you need. That's the point. And it's also seeking help if you need some help. And also just acknowledging, this is not what my book does, but there's other books like Period by Maisie Hill, and others like that talk about knowing your cycle a bit better, to know when you've got lots of energy and when you've not,
Mm.
and trying to work to that. And I think it's really interesting that since I wrote the book, football teams, ladies football teams, are now using their cycles a bit more, knowledge of the cycles, to play their players in a better way, perhaps, rather than what Annabel Croft talks about, which is the periods like the
Mm.
last taboo in tennis, because they were given drugs to suppress their periods for years, which had side effects. The reason there isn't
Mm.
a male pill is because every time they put men into a trial for it, men say, oh, I can't hack that, I feel sick. Well, try taking hormones for most of your life. I don't own a single pair of trousers that I wear outside of the home, which means, yes, Susanna, I'm either in tights, leggings, or occasionally bare legs, but never very often as much as you would like, because I'm freezing all the time, which is when we met originally what I asked you about. What do I do with these dresses that require bare legs on the models, and we live in England and it's very cold? So for me it certainly is.
Mm.
So tights, I do have some comfier ones that have been worn in, shall we say,
Mm.
over the years, that I gravitate towards, and they're in a separate section of my drawer that has the whole, I don't know what you could call it, a forest of tights. There are so many tights that I own, and obviously they don't always last very long. Some of them do if you invest.